On the broadcast tonight, the ball is now in North Korea's court. South Korea proposes a final round of talks with the North on the fate of a shuttered joint industrial zone, suggesting, in effect, the zone could close permanently if negotiations fail. Fewer Korean manufacturers are seeing eye to eye with the government's projection that the economy will pick up momentum in the latter half of the year. We'll tell you why. And Mideast peace talks, the first substantive peace talks between Israel and the Palestinians in years, will begin in Washington tonight. This after Israeli leaders agreed to release more than 100 Palestinian prisoners. Early edition begins now. It is 11 a.m. in Cairo, 9 p.m. in Wellington, and 6 on a Monday evening here in Seoul. Welcome to Early Edition at 6. I'm Moon Gon-young.
And I'm Daniel Che. Thank you for tuning in. Final proposal from the South. That's our starting point for today.
The ball is now in North Korea's court as the South awaits Pyongyang's response to a proposal for a dialogue over the issue of reopening their jointly run Kaesong industrial complex.
Seoul says this will be its last offer for talks before going ahead with a quote-unquote grave measure. Our Unification Ministry correspondent Hwang Sang-hee reports.
North Korea did not give an answer on Monday to what the South calls its final proposal for talks regarding the normalization of the Kaesong industrial complex. Seoul's Unification Ministry said it offered to hold a 7th round of working-level talks to the North through their inter-Korean hotline on Monday morning. The ministry said it did not lay out when and where the meeting should take place, but requested a swift response. The two Koreas have held 6 rounds of working-level talks this month on reopening the business park, but the two have so far failed to narrow their differences. Seoul has demanded safeguards against future closures before reopening the complex, while Pyongyang has pushed for an immediate, unconditional resumption of operations.
It is important for the two Koreas to cooperate in developing the Kaesong industrial complex into an internationally competitive business park. In order for us to do that, it's essential to ensure that there will never be a repeat of the incidents that we saw in March and April of this year.
While the South has warned of grave measures if its proposal goes unanswered by the North, experts say chances for concrete progress in the talks are slim, with Seoul showing no sign of change in its own stance. They say without any compromises from the South, North Korea will not be positive about the idea of implementing safeguards against future closures of the complex. But some remain upbeat about Pyongyang's response, saying that the North may not want to let go of the joint business park, a source of hard currency for the cash-strapped nation. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
So are we really headed for a permanent shutdown of the Kaesong Industrial Park? What's running through the minds of the leaders in the South and North?
Joining us live in the studio to give us some perspective is Dr. Choi Kang, Vice President of the Asan Institute for Policy Studies. Dr. Choi, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Pleasure to be back here.
All right, so the latest on the inter-Korean talks over the Kaesong Industrial Complex is that the South Korean government, in effect, has given an ultimatum, if you will, to the North to come to the talks over this issue. Now, is there a real danger here that both Koreas are, in fact, willing to give up on this last inter-Korean joint cooperative project?
I don't think this is the final ultimatum. This is the ultimatum at the moment. So actually, neither side afford to lose the game at here. Actually, because for example, North Korea has some financial interest in maintaining the Kaesong industrial complex. On the other hand, South Korea has some kind of political burden if it terminates as Kaesong industrial complex project. So I think. At this point, I think this is playing a game, a negotiation game. That's a tactic usually used in dealing with this tough negotiation. So at the moment, I think there's a very slim chance for both Koreas to come back to the negotiation table. So I think maybe at the moment, actually we will see some kinds of impasse in the negotiation between the two Koreas.
Now, the South Korean government, I guess, officially made this proposal earlier this morning, and we haven't gotten an answer yet back from North Korea. Now, it doesn't look like we'll be getting one today because the hotline talks at the Panmunjom is closed for the day. Now, were we expecting an answer today?
Actually, kinds of maybe North Korea will consider South Korea offer. That kinds of answer we were expecting. But actually, take a look at this. They had huge military parade on Saturday. So actually, they need more time to think about it, and they have to consult with other concerned parties as well. So I think North Korea actually in a mode of contemplating what kinds of measures of response they have to take vis-a-vis South Korea. And also maybe if they are considering this is a final ultimatum, what will be countermeasures they can offer to South Korea? That could be the things going on inside of North Korea right now.
Okay, torn between choices, probably at a crossroads for North Korea for the future and their well-being. 6th round of talks, and North Korea claims they've revised their proposal 5 times, but it's not about numbers. How substantial were these changes in your opinion?
Of course, North Korea can claim it has been very cooperative in revising the four conditions. For example, like internationalization of Kaesong Industrial Park and guarantee the personal safety and the investment. But actually, the most critical thing, they have not changed anything, any posture at all. That's why reassurance of the prevention of the recurring the similar cases in the future. That is about who is responsible for this current impasse or current situation. North Korea claims it is the South Korea's policy vis-a-vis North Korea was the main cause of this the problem. On the other hand, actually, South Korea claims North Korea's unilateral measures to withdraw as labors from the Kaesong Industrial Park was the main cause. So actually, it's about the responsibility of this current impasse or current situation. So actually, North Korea has not changed its position on this matter at all. Actually, they claim South Korea actually challenged the ultimate authority of North Korean leadership. So actually, by taking that point, I think it is very difficult for North Korea to change its position on this matter. So I think the key issue is whether North Korea can make a pledge for the prevention of the similar cases into the future. That's critical, but they have not changed their position yet.
All right, so that's what South Korea wants them to, I guess, make a vow that this will never, ever repeat again.
Yes.
Now, the head delegate of North Korea put on quite a show before South Korean reporters following the 6th round of talks, threatened to bring back its military to the Kaesong Industrial Zone area. Now, what are they trying to accomplish through this?
Actually, I think that was intended to the South Korean audience. So to try to agitate some political debate in South Korea. Because, for example, if the Kaesong Industrial Complex to be transferred into the military complex again, it's a sign of the Cold War confrontation on the Korean Peninsula. So by saying that kind of word to the press, I think that North Korea tried to create a pressure inside South Korea upon the South Korean government to be more flexible in dealing with this issue. So it's rather a propaganda, a politically designed move taken by the North Korean delegates.
So it was not an individual emotional outburst, but
no, it's well calculated.
Well calculated. Okay. Well, the current impasse in talks, is it a breakdown in trust between, or what little trust we had between the two Koreas, in your opinion?
So actually, South Korea is intending to build the real trust, and also from the general and universal point of view, instead of dealing with North Korea from special point of view or special treatment of North Korea as an exceptional case. So that is not the real trust. So we want to have a real genuine trust that could be honored and respected by all the international communities. So South Korea in a mode to build the genuine trust between the two Koreas by introducing new framework of cooperation between the two Koreas.
Now, it's actually the Ulchi Freedom Guardian exercises, the joint military exercise between South Korean and U.S. forces that Pyongyang wants scrapped, isn't it? Now, of course, that's not going to happen. The drills aren't going anywhere, and
Definitely,
it will
yes.
happen as planned next month. Now, is that going to make things more difficult for the resumption of operations at Kaesong?
Of course, North Korea will take that exercise as an excuse for not returning to the talks, of course, and also they will also increase the rhetoric threat vis-a-vis South Korea, or maybe they can say, oh, we will going to respond in kinds to South Korea as well as the other concerned parties. But actually, they will. I assume that's the rhetoric will be there, but I don't know whether they will take any serious, the real action vis-a-vis South Korea and the United States. I'm a little bit doubtful. because actually North Korea is very much concerned with further isolation of itself from the international community, and also there's also the Chinese concern about the North Korea's abortive, maybe aggressive action vis-a-vis South Korea would actually undermine Chinese position in dealing with North Korean issue. So I think maybe after the ending of the Ulchi Freedom Guardian exercise, we will have some kinds of revival of some talks, maybe from the beginning of mid-September or early October. That's my hunch at this point of time.
Well, they did spend a lot of money on their what they call victory celebrations recently, so maybe that's one more reason for them to not spend too much on military operations in the near future.
Definitely.
Dr. Che Gang, Vice President of the ASEAN Institute for Policy Studies, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with heroes and experts to help you understand the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best with Moon Gun-young and Daniel Che on Early Edition at 6.
Now shifting gears to the economy, Korea's import prices rose by 2 Over at Korea's National Assembly, Korea's rival political parties have failed to confirm the list of witnesses for an upcoming parliamentary investigation into allegations that the National Spy Agency meddled in last year's presidential election. A special committee meeting on Monday with representatives from the ruling and opposition parties in attendance yielded no agreement on who they would question as part of the probe. Regardless, the National Assembly's Special Investigative Committee will be briefed by the National Intelligence Service next Monday, and hearings will be held on August 7th and 8th. Meanwhile, prosecutors in Seoul investigating whether food and entertainment conglomerate CJ Group bribed top tax officials with cash and expensive gifts say they've gotten a confession out of one of the suspects. Following intensive questioning over the weekend, prosecutors say that former Deputy Commissioner of the National Tax Service, Ho Byung-ik, admitted passing on a bribe from CJ to his boss at the time, former tax agency chief Jeon Gun-pyo, in exchange for not auditing their group, which was under suspicion of tax evasion at that time. Now, Ho was arrested on Saturday on allegations that he took $300,000 and luxury watches from CJ Group in 2006. His former boss, Jeon, has reportedly denied ever receiving the bribes. Prosecutors will soon summon the former tax agency chief to see whether the agency was involved in CJ Group's attempts to avoid paying taxes.
Moving on, more manufacturers in the nation feel pessimistic about the Korean economy in the second half of the year. This while the country's policymakers have predicted last week that the economy will pick up steam in the second half of this year. Our economics correspondent Hwang Jie explains what's behind the contradiction.
Not many Korean manufacturers seem confident about the nation's nascent economic recovery. Only days after the government welcomed signs of recovery and promised steps to spur growth, the Bank of Korea said Monday that the business sentiment index for July remained subdued, coming in at 72, down from the 79 tallied a month earlier. The index that gauges manufacturers' expectations on business conditions dropped the most this month in a year. A reading below the benchmark 100 means pessimists outnumber optimists. The central bank official said demand at home and abroad remained weak even after considering normally slow factory operations during the summer vacation season. The drop in business sentiment comes less than a week after the central bank said the economy grew at the fastest pace in 2 years in the second quarter of this year. The economy grew 1.1% in the April to June period from the previous quarter, rising above 1% for the first time in 9 quarters. Experts attribute the recovery in the second quarter largely to government stimulus measures and stress that weak overseas demand, particularly in China, is weighing on manufacturers' business sentiment.
Government policies affect investment, but the most important factor when deciding on investment is the level of demand. Companies will expand investment only when they think their products will sell well, but current conditions are very uncertain.
In the face of lackluster global demand, facilities investments declined in the second quarter of this year, reflecting the manufacturer's bleak outlook for the second half of this year. Hwang Jie, Arirang News.
Hyundai Motor Group is on track for a banner year. U.S.-based market researcher LMC Automotive forecast Monday that Korea's largest automotive manufacturer will record an all-time high in terms of global market share this year based on the number of cars sold. Hyundai Motor and its affiliate Kia Motors sold around 3.7 million vehicles in the first half of this year, giving it 8.8% of global market share. That is 0.2 percentage points higher compared to the same period last year, driven by demand in Europe and in countries like China and Brazil. Experts say the Hyundai Group is expected to pass the 9% mark by the end of the year, despite a drop of sales in the United States.
Visiting Prime Minister of New Zealand John Key concluded a 5-day trip to South Korea Monday by holding a special luncheon forum in Seoul. Prime Minister Key highlighted his views on some pending political and economic issues concerning Korea and the Pacific Island nation. Arirang News Han Daeun was there.
New Zealand Prime Minister John Key delivered a special speech to high-ranking Korean officials and prominent business figures at a luncheon forum on Monday. The Prime Minister, who arrived in Korea to mark the 60th year since the signing of the Korean Armistice Agreement, touched upon a wide range of issues. Beginning his speech by thanking war veterans, the leader expressed support for President Park Geun-hye's North Korea policy.
So in this regard, I applaud President Park's aspiration for peace and stability on the peninsula, including her efforts to reach out to North Korea. We reject North Korea's provocations. We call on them to commit firmly to abandon nuclear weapons.
Saying the relationship between South Korea and New Zealand has become increasingly significant ever since the Korean War, he highlighted the two nations' economic ties.
Interesting that Korea is comfortably our 5th largest export market, but trade is highly complementary in nature.
He focused especially on the Korea-New Zealand Free Trade Agreement, saying the deal would bring about prosperity for both sides. The leader brushed off worries that the FTA would hurt Korea's domestic agricultural sector, the main hurdle that derailed trade negotiations in 2010.
But of course, New Zealand doesn't really compete with a lot of the core and critical and sensitive issues around agriculture. So, for instance, we don't produce rice, and probably will never do so. Our conditions don't suit that.
Reports suggest that the two countries will resume FTA negotiations sometime this year. But whether the two sides will be able to narrow differences on the sticking points this time around remains to be seen. Han Daeun, Arirang News.
Officials from the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board are at the headquarters of Asiana Airlines in Seoul today as part of their probe into the recent plane crash at San Francisco International Airport. Meanwhile, the Chinese families who lost children in the crash have hired a leading American law firm to represent them. Arirang News' Kim Young-gil has been following this story.
The 10-day probe will be conducted by an investigative team comprised of 6 officials from the NTSB, 2 from the Federal Aviation Administration, and 2 from Boeing.
I'm here with a portion of my team of technical experts to continue the fact-gathering stage of our research into the accident.
The investigator declined to comment further on the investigation into the July 6th crash of the Boeing 777 plane, which killed 3 and left 180 injured.
Please, all other questions to Public Affairs in Washington. No questions here, please.
Korea's Transportation Ministry says the purpose of the U.S. visit is to confirm what they have found at the San Francisco crash site and compare details on the Asiana's operations. Working in collaboration with Korean investigators and Asiana Airlines officials, the American investigators will also examine Asiana's flight maintenance and pilot training programs. Meanwhile, the families of 3 Chinese teenage girls who were killed in the Asiana crash have hired a leading American law firm to represent them. Reuters reported last week that it is likely the families will file lawsuits against Asiana Airlines, the plane manufacturer Boeing, and the San Francisco Fire Department. The NTSB's final report on the crash of Asiana Flight 214 is expected to take at least a year. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
The driver of a high-speed train that derailed last week in northwest Spain, killing at least 79 people, has been charged with multiple counts of reckless homicide. Meanwhile, a new report shows a safety system that could have helped prevent the derailment was not in place at the time of the accident. Our Kim Min-ji has the details.
The driver of the train, Francisco Garson, was released on bail on Sunday after reportedly admitting that he had behaved recklessly. But a judge has barred him from leaving Spain and ordered him to make regular appearances before the court. Garson is suspected of driving too fast through a tight curve. Video of the accident shows a high-speed Alvia train derailing as it turned into a bend near the northwestern city of Santiago de Compostela. The train was reportedly traveling at more than double the 80-km/h speed limit at the time of the crash. Authorities said that the high-speed trains are equipped with an automatic speed control system called the European Rail Traffic Management System, which automatically initiates the brakes on a train when it is going too fast. The system was installed on the train and also on most of the track along the route the train was on, but was not installed on the 5-km stretch of track near the crash site, meaning the driver would have been responsible for controlling the speed as the train approached its destination. Eyewitness accounts indicate that Garson said he wanted to die rather than see the damage, and that he tried to slow down, but it was too late. The death toll from the crash was 79 as of Sunday, and at least 130 people have been injured in what has been the country's worst accident in decades. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Turning now to what could be a major breakthrough in the Middle East peace process. Negotiators from Israel and Palestine will meet for direct peace talks on Monday in Washington, ending a 3-year diplomatic impasse. Our Yudian reports.
After months of intense shuttle diplomacy, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is taking a lot of credit for getting Israel and Palestine back to the table for peace talks. State Department spokeswoman Jen Psaki says the two countries accepted invitations from Kerry to formally resume negotiations. The talks are scheduled to take place in Washington from Monday evening to Tuesday between senior aides of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. This comes after Israel's cabinet on Sunday approved the release of 104 Palestinian prisoners. Netanyahu's proposal to release the prisoners, a plan he called a very painful decision, divided the cabinet, with 13 voting in favor and 7 against. Israel threw thousands of Palestinians into prison in the early 1990s for carrying out deadly attacks, and some of the prisoners that are due to be released have served around 30 years. The release of the prisoners remains a highly emotional one for both sides.
We can't express our feeling. Any human being will feel the same. For 20 years he has been in jail, which is the period of his youth, and we were prevented from visiting him, so we hope, God willing, to see him as soon as possible.
You don't release murderous terrorists. It's an indescribable crime, spitting in the face of the bereaved families and the Israeli people.
The prisoners will be freed in a minimum of 4 stages over a 9-month period. Yurian, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, over in Cairo, Egypt's foreign minister is calling on Egyptians to refrain from violence a day after clashes between supporters of ousted President Mohamed Morsi and security forces killed at least 70 people there. Speaking to the BBC, Nabil Fahmy said all violence must stop for the interim leadership or to move forward with a transition to a new government. Morsi supporters have vowed to continue their protests against the country's new military-backed leaders, despite the interior minister having said the new government will act soon to disperse the sit-in protests at one of Cairo's largest mosques. There has been strong criticism from both in and outside Egypt against the government's use of excessive force against protesters on Saturday. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry urged the interim government to respect the right of peaceful assembly and freedom of expression.
President Park Geun-hye is off on a 5-day summer vacation starting this Monday. The vacation is the president's first holiday, since she took office on February 25th. But some at the presidential office say she may be called back to work at some point to deal with unresolved issues. Her holiday destination has not been disclosed for security reasons. It's so hot and humid that the president had to take her summer vacation right now. And for some updates on the weather conditions, we have our Hannah Kim, who is standing by. Hello there, Hannah.
Hello, Danielle. These tropical weather conditions are very common after the monsoon rain, and heat wave advisories are still issued on Jeju Island and parts of the Gyeongsang provinces.
Right, this scorching heat has been a real issue for those down in the south, and I hear Ulsan even reached 36.6 degrees this afternoon. I have never heard of that temperature before.
That's right. We are expecting more rain tomorrow, and showers will start in the south, most likely in the Jeolla provinces in the morning, and the rain clouds will then move north by the evening, so you may want to keep an umbrella handy. Now, our temperatures have been soaring above the 30s, so if we take a closer look at the forecast, Seoul will start off the morning at 24 and reach 32 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, cities in the south will once again have blazing hot temperatures, with Daegu and Busan peaking to 34 and 30 degrees respectively. Down on Jeju Island, we'll have gradually sunnier conditions. Daejeon will hit 33, while Dokdo and Mount Kumgang top off at 26. Well, that's all I have for you today. I'm Hannah Kim. Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, Hannah. And that's all from us. Thank you for watching.
And we'll see you same time tomorrow evening right here. Good night.